Welcome to the Nurtured Nerds Epic Podcast.
Come join us and get cuddly,
Get gaming,
get nerdy,
and get nurtured. Yep, we decided not to practice that. That was my choice, but that's still fun, right? It still
Totally
worked, right,
worked.
Grace?
Totally worked.
It's all good. I like doing improv. Let's see, and I did remember to record this time, so that's important. All right. Well, hello. I am Mary, and I'm in Salt Lake City, and I'm a professional cuddler, and I am a cuddle party facilitator, and I've been doing that for about 6 or 7 years now. And I retired from my day job, so I don't get to say that anymore. So woohoo! So I'm working on all my other projects, my businesses, and trying to do more cuddle work and more things with groups like this. So that's been really fun working that out. And my co-host today is Grace. Grace, will you introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to. I'm Grace, and I am a professional cuddler as well as a facilitator, a professional cuddle group facilitator. There it is. And as well as I do coaching. I particularly love working with people in grief, helping them to navigate that journey because it is a journey. And I have not retired from my day job. Yay!
Yay! Yeah, you have a job. That's a good thing these days, right?
That's a good thing. So that's me. I'm here and I'm excited to be co-hosting today.
Wonderful. So on today's episode, we're going to be interviewing a trailblazing leader of our cuddle community, which I'm so excited to talk to her. Yay. She does a lot of consent work and other kind of things that she's going to tell us about today. But we're going to be talking to Jean Franzblau. Hopefully I said your name right, Jean.
You did great. Hello, okay. And thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor, and I'm smiling because it feels like a homecoming in a way. It just feels very cozy to have this chance to talk to you both.
That's so awesome. Yeah, we're going to get to the questions in a minute, but first, you know what we do. We like to talk about tea. So let's see what everybody's drinking today. Does anybody want to share?
Crystal clear water.
Crystal clear water. That's my favorite too. I've got a huge cup as well. Oh, so does Grace.
I've got organic peppermint herbal tea this year. For some reason, like everybody gave me tea.
Oh, nice.
For Christmas. Yeah. So I've got like 6 new boxes of tea to try, but today it's peppermint. It settles my stomach.
Yeah, peppermint is one of my favorites. I love the peppermint blends especially. And I actually am drinking something. I wanted to shout out to Crystal Cavett because I am drinking mud water today. So yeah, that was one of her favorites. And I actually I've never been a coffee drinker, but I am enjoying mud water. It's like I love how it says in their promotional materials, like if cacao and chai had a baby, that's what this is.
Oh, that sounds yummy, actually.
It is actually. Yeah, it's a mix of cacao and chai, and it's kind of got some mushroom, really good stuff in it. So it's kind of earthy cacao flavor. So yeah, I love it. That's really good. That's what I'm drinking today. So that's what we're drinking. Well, let's go talk with Jean because that's what we're here for today. I'm so excited. Jean, will you tell us a little more about you? What kind of work do you do, and maybe what kind of nerd do you consider yourself?
Sure. So I'm the founder of Cuddle Sanctuary, as of last month, celebrating its 7th year offering services out in the world. And I consider myself a cuddle expert. And what that means is right now, what that really means, like where that means it lands in my identity, is I'm a teacher of professional cuddlers. My courses, I consider them artisanal small batch courses where I bring amazing human beings through a process to help them feel empowered and ready to offer these unique services to the world. And also, what I feel like that a lot of that work on consent and boundaries and caring about the needs of partners and my own needs and all of that helped to develop me enough to dare to also be an intimacy coordinator for TV and film. So I help actors who are doing very daring work involving nudity, sexuality, intimacy on screen to help them navigate conversations with production, with directors, to make sure that everyone's feeling as safe and comfortable as possible, given that the work is inherently very awkward. It may be scintillating or fun to watch, but super awkward to shoot in most cases. And so I put myself in awkward situations, having awkward conversations, to make things feel a little bit more creative and a little less weird when doing that odd work. Pretending, a lot of, basically making pretend and making amazing cinema or TV.
I'm super fascinated by that. And I know we have a couple of questions about that a little bit later in our interview. But I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about your work in the film industry before you discovered cuddling? What motivated that direction in your life in that time?
Yeah, I was 16 years old when I first felt empowered to pursue acting in Florida. I had, through working since 14, got my own used car, and I had my driver's license. And in Florida, there was an industry of people doing print modeling and commercial acting and things like that. And I wanted to do it and pursue it. And so I was always this ambitious kid and very interested in the performing arts. So, so it began there. And when I was almost 18, I came out from Florida to California, or more specifically, from Hollywood, Florida to Hollywood, California.
That's awesome.
To pursue what I would consider sort of to be a good girl and go to college, grateful for my family's insistence. I never thought there was any other path, because I'm a very lucky, privileged child. But to do the good girl thing and to go to school, but then to do the thing I was really curious about doing, which is pursuing acting, and started taking class and things like that. And so that took me on a journey, being an 18-year-old, fresh-faced from Florida, interested in acting. But that was my entryway, was the performing arts piece. And then I got other experiences, like I had the experience to assist in a casting office, which I loved, helping actors to get the job or cheer them on as I did the administrative work to get them auditions so they can hopefully win a part on a TV commercial. And similarly, I'd say the biggest, most empowering thing was, after many years of feeling at the whim of somebody who would choose to cast me, I began producing small projects. So I started to write and produce a few small projects. One of them was at the turn of the century. In 1999, I started writing something, and then right around there, I was hanging out with a group of artists, cinema artists, who are all striving and ambitious, and with that support, produced my first short film called Internet Dating. And that was when internet dating was something you were quiet about. Like, if you met somebody online, it was something you were very private about. Now it's just like, that's the way we meet these days. But back then it was something a bit secretive. So it was very bold to create a short film about such a topic.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I always love being on the set. I just think that's amazing. So the idea that I made a set, that I was part of putting together people with equipment and a makeup artist and lights and everything, and then I got to be in front of that camera, was such a joy and very empowering, and changed me.
Wow. Wonderful. So you've always been sort of a trailblazer.
Oh, thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just taking that in with a smile on my face. That feels really nice to just hear you say it that way.
Yeah, there's something about that. And then to shift into your cuddling work, where certainly was trailblazing. Tell us how you discovered cuddling professionally.
I'm going to take the long route, because the short route is very neat, and the long route is very messy, and I think it's more interesting.
Sounds like life.
Like life.
That's like life, right? Yeah.
So I'll begin with being trapped in a relationship that was going for too long.
Mm.
Being codependent to relationships should have ended at the 2-year mark, but was continuing on through the 4-year mark. And a relationship exposed, trigger warning, but I'm not going to go deep into it, but a relationship that included a sexual assault. So the relationship was lasting too long for a variety of reasons, but a really important one is that I was assaulted and didn't have the language for it, just knew that my body was turning away from my partner. And so at the time, the way that was being described, our narrative was that something was wrong with my body that needed to be fixed medically. You see the disconnect between the body, between the actual story and what was actually happening, and what I allowed to be my story about what was happening between us was, but there was something very anger making. I was feeling angry about that narrative, but I didn't have a counter narrative for it at the time.
Right.
But at the time, I thought there was something wrong with my body, that I wasn't able to be intimate with my partner. I was diagnosed with a pelvic problem, and basically, I was diagnosed with a body sanity. My body was rejecting my partner. I thought I had like a lifelong problem, but no, my body was just like, no, the person we have a problem with is him. And as soon as I initiated a breakup with that person, my body snapped back to happiness. I was able to be intimate with other partners with a quite amount of joy. But the fact that I had to go there, meaning that I had so much disconnect between my intuition, between my not my intuition, my instincts.
Yes.
So separate from my instincts as a woman, which I was trained well to do, which is a cultural travesty.
Yes.
To be trained well, to be a good girl means to separate myself from my instincts. All right, so that happened, and I was really keen after that relationship and a whole lot of grieving to have the space and the permission to explore my sexuality. That felt really important to me because I had allowed this relationship to shut it down.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was just no one around me who would affirm that sexuality is an important part of human life. That is just, it just was not highlighted as a special thing or an important thing. But I knew in my kishkas, in Yiddish for guts, that it was important to me. And so, Grace, a little while ago, you said, you've been a trailblazer and that's how cuddling happened. I'm like, oh, if you only knew. And maybe you do know this part of my story, but where I entered into being culturally different on I guess, yes, the internet dating piece was a bold step. But I started to allow myself to explore sexually. And then I wrote a play about it. And then I performed my show about the coming of age or blooming into my own sexuality. I performed it in 10 cities.
That's awesome.
And it evolved because me now, like it evolved into classes.
Sure.
I began offering classes about being self-accepting around sexuality and spoke with my family members to say, hey, I'm performing a show about sexuality and I'm going to use my actual name. And I have a unique name, a unique last name. So I gave them this heads up because it's like, that might be a thing for you. People who are looking you up might see what your sibling is doing or what your daughter or your niece is doing. And I wanted to give you a heads up about it. I'm not asking your permission, but I am giving you a heads up.
Yeah.
And so frankly, after that journey, cuddling was like, simple. That's just like being a little weird. But what I was doing before that was really outside the box. I had been a corporate self-employed person. And I'm like, doing this show could end my financial safety.
Yes.
Or at least my ability to be a corporate professional.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm in. Because it felt too important. felt too important to use a pseudonym for the messages that I was discovering, and the things I was talking about felt way too important. Yeah. So how did that get me to cuddling? Well, during that time, I discovered a group called Sex Positive Los Angeles. Sex positivity is part of a movement, a worldwide movement, and Sex Positive Los Angeles is part of a nonprofit that I'm now on the advisory board of called sexpositiveworld.org. And the message of that organization was very in alignment with my own values, that my sexuality and everyone's, it's part of a natural part of the human experience. And along with it comes gender identity, is something that I care very much about. People having, like, whoever you're born to be, you get to be. That feels important to me. Whoever you're attracted to being with, you know, as long as we're talking about consensual relationships, please, may the culture give a thumbs up and encouragement to that, along with relationship styles. The bold affirmation that monogamy is a beautiful expression of love and togetherness and family, but it's not the only one. There's many, many ways to love, and I participate in other ways besides monogamy. And so in other words, again, there's all these different edges of our culture that I've explored. Well, one day, I was on a flight doing corporate type of work as a speaker and teacher in the corporate world, and saw a picture of people cuddling. And if you can sort of imagine the magazine I was looking at, I'm imagining, what was that magazine? Oh, maybe it was like a Sharper Image type magazine, or something that had, probably, if it had cuddling in it, it was an article. So let's imagine that there was a perfume ad with like a beautiful young person selling expensive perfume. And if you would just purchase it, you will have status. And on the next page, another ad of people riding on horses looking very young and beautiful. And if you will just get this extraordinarily expensive tank top, you too can have status. And then there's this picture of people cuddling, which has nothing to do with status. It has to do with human connection, and people getting along and cooperating. And there was something in me that said yes to it, that said, whatever this is, speaks to something deep underneath the surface of things. And at the time, there was no cuddling being offered in Los Angeles. I kept checking and looking and looking and checking. But when I attended that group, Sex Positive LA, part of their orientation at the time was, we're going to get to know each other. We're going to tell you about our organization. And then we're going to have this structured cuddling thing. And I'm like, what? It's happening. It's happening. I didn't feel empowered to make it happen in my own life. But when an authority figure whom I trusted said, I'm going to show you how to create the structure around safe cuddling, I was thrilled. And I had a beautiful experience. I remember somebody spooning in front of me, somebody spooning behind me, both of whom I just met. And in that horizontal position where we all felt safe and comfortable knowing the structure of what we were doing, the conversations were deep. There was no small talk happening. It was so enriching. It was like the difference between junk food and a nourishing stew. And right away, I wanted to start putting on events similar. So my entry into professional cuddling, or at least doing something official, was in the group space. And so I used that organization to, it was my, I'm trying to think of the word of like the incubator. That Los Angeles group was the incubator to what would become Cuddle Sanctuary. At the time, they still do, have a really careful vetting process that a person needs to come with respect and integrity, open-mindedness, and an understanding of what the group is and isn't in order to be allowed in. Then the orientation is another layer of filtering. How do you handle yourself at the orientation? Are people feeling safe with you? Are you able to create safety? All of those things to determine if a person gets to stay in the group.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so when I put on my events in that group, I felt like, okay, generally people have been vetted. The big question I had when I thought about offering cuddle events and Cuddle Sanctuary socials in public in 2014, the question on my mind was, how can I trust who's going to walk through the door if I offer these events publicly? And that was a really interesting thing to untangle. How do I assure safety? What are the guidelines and how do I make sure people will follow them and all of that? Anyway, it became an odyssey, which I'm continue to be on, but I have a lot of answers to those questions. And that while I was doing that is when I began to see images in the news about people offering one-on-one services. And I was like, well, that's intriguing. And finally, somebody just said, I want to recommend you to somebody I know who's hurting a lot, who is missing one-on-one cuddling. Will you see this person as a client? And at the time, there were no classes on the subject.
Right.
But I trusted myself that I could create something and create a container of safety for this individual. And that is how my first session occurred. And over time, colleagues in other states and places began to create trainings, and I began to create my own. And then there was a lot of exchanging. I want to give a huge high five and shout out to Cuddle Up to Me and to Sam Hess in Portland, Oregon, because Sam wasn't like, I have intellectual property and you are a competitor. You know what she did at the time? She said, I'd like to send you the instructional design of my entire course.
Wow.
Please use it, because she was concerned that I might provide subpar training. And that was her biggest concern is, please, if you're going to offer training, at least look what I'm doing, and what a gift. And for quite some time, the stamp of certified cuddlers, which is also Sam Hess's work, was in my workbook. And there even is some pieces in the appendix that says courtesy of certified cuddlers, as just a shout out and a shout of gratitude to Sam Hess. And so many of us doing this work who come together, even though we're human and we have our own ego needs, I certainly do, that we keep overcoming ourselves and coming together in collaboration and community. I mean, Nurtured Nerds, what a great example of that.
Yeah, I love how we do it in the cuddle community, where it's like there's room for all cuddlers. Let's help each other, let's feed off each other, let's learn what we can learn from each other and what we want to share. That's such an amazing part of all of our cuddlers that are out there right now that I just am amazed by continually.
It is, and it's not perfect. I mean, I've had run into scrapes with everyone.
Yeah. It's not perfect. We're all people, but the overall feeling.
What were you going to say, Grace?
Yeah. I mean, it truly is a cuddle community. And so, when you live in a community, not all the neighbors get along all the time, but we do our best to maintain safe, warm, nurturing community.
And to me, the intimacy is built through friction. Intimacy is built through disagreements that people have the maturity to come together to actually unpack
and work out. Yeah.
I have literally had conversations with folks who would perhaps seem like competitors and say, I'm envious of you because you have this. And then they would say, I'm envious of you because you have this. And it's just like, how beautiful, how freaking beautiful to be able to see beyond mystique. Because the other organization, what's going on under the hood of another organization becomes like mystique, because we're only on the outside seeing what's shiny and presentable and marketed. But when we can go underneath and go, and I'm hurting underneath here, and I feel left out, and I have FOMO, and Wah! You got the thing that I was being considered for, and wah!
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I love that.
It's kind of what you were saying earlier about awkward conversations too. I love talking about awkward conversations. Like every time we can have an awkward conversation with each other, I feel like when we come out on the other side, we're going to have a stronger relationship, no matter what it was about.
Yes, I think it's everything. I don't know a relationship that has thrived that hasn't included, like, here's where I end and you begin. Here's where you're in my kitchen and I need you out of my kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, how else do we get intimate with each other but to bump into each other?
Right.
At least that's my experience so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to skip ahead because we had this question later, but just hearing your story of your journey up through your sexuality journey and then into cuddling, that's kind of that's a little the opposite of what I did. But anyway, on the subject of sex and sexuality, how do you feel like that is different or the same as cuddling, and how does cuddling like feed into sex positive and sexuality? And
so great. Well, first of all, Cuddle Sanctuary events began to be required for the sex positive community at a certain time. Going to a non-sexual, platonic, affection-oriented hug type of event and learning the boundaries of that practice is what would help the sex positive. Where more sexual energy or erotic energy was allowed in the event, this was considered the stepping stone or foundational lessons,
right?
Because they build upon each other.
Yeah.
My consent skills work really well for me in sexual spaces, of course. So one can consider it. Trying to think of, like, when one goes to college, there's certain units you have to get or certain classes you have to take. What are they called?
Like 101 classes.
Yeah, it's like considered the basics, foundational or basics for a major or something.
Yeah.
So the lessons learned at Cuddle events are transferable and important. General education is what it's often called. Thanks. So another thing that I want to put out there is, what is the distinction between different kinds of touch? And I'd like to consider maybe a pie model where there might be sensual touch that is like a caress of the face, that it is simply delightful for its own, just as is. But then there's maybe overlapping aspects of the pie where eroticism might enter into it, where for one person, a caress of the lips just feels pleasant. For another person, it's searingly erotic. So it's not necessarily the gesture, it's its meaning.
Yeah.
And where do I bring those things? Like, so my intention in entering a space might be such and such. What is allowed, what is welcome into the space is important. And then there's maybe good old fashioned tingly energy. Where is the blood pumping to? So, like if I scratch a part of my body, then the blood might come to the surface and that feels a certain way. But then in another way, if my thoughts go to the erotic, or if certain touches remind me of things, or I have muscle memory that spooning is before or after eroticism or sexuality, well, then the blood might be rushing to the erogenous zones. And now I'd say we're like squarely in a sexual space. And so I consider my birthright to be able to explore all the different parts of the pie that I choose to. And so cuddling is one of those slices. And I deserve to have in my life places I can go or people that I can be with, where I can receive the hugs and the caressing, the kindness and the love of non-sexual, non-erotic connection.
Yeah.
But I really want everyone to have access to the different parts of themselves that include and that plus more.
Yes.
It just happens to be that, and when I'm doing Cuddle Sanctuary stuff, that's the sliver in which that I'm focusing on. It's an offering for the world, because in a culture that was formed around Puritanism, we've got some problems. And some of them are just around the basic human need for love and kindness. So it's a nice entry, and it's a nice place in which a person can have an entire career.
Yeah, I love that. There's just such a whole spectrum of how we can connect with other human beings. And in our culture, it's like it's so focused on it's either sex or there's no other choice. There's then there's nothing. Then there's abstinence or there's sex. And it's like, no, that's just not true. There's so much in between. And so that's why I like to focus on cuddling, of like, here's this option. Sex is great and good. We're just not doing it right now. We're doing this. We're doing cuddling. We're doing consent. We're doing connection through conversation and eye gazing and being fully present with the other person without the sexual energy, which is, it's the tool in your toolbox for how to connect with people.
It is. And there's it's like, it's nurturing, and like physical, platonic touch can be healing in so many ways. And so it's so important for people to understand that it's not just that, professional cuddling is not a euphemism for something else. It truly is a valuable thing on its own.
Well, and I also, from me too, myself, I've come across like, oh, you're a cuddler, that means you're against sex. I'm like, absolutely not. Cuddling is totally sex positive. I am actually the chapter lead for Utah Sex Positive. And we use Cuddle Party for our orientation here.
So it's the same. It evolved similarly.
Yeah, exactly.
How cool. How fun. How lucky.
I know, isn't it? Yeah, that's how I got hooked into Sex Positive, because she's like, oh, let's just use that. That'll be our orientation. I'm like, okay.
That's beautiful. So good to know. Thank you for sharing it. And I wanted this conversation, and I'm so happy that it is, to be able to allow for the larger and broader context in which that we're in. And I'm ready to talk about that more.
Yeah, me too. I love that.
Well, just briefly, you've been talking a lot about consent, and the one question that we have is that do you think that finding and practicing your yes is as important as finding and practicing your no?
I would say it's more advanced.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
In our culture, I'll speak for myself as a daughter of the patriarchy. I've received more touch than I've wanted, and I've had 2 sexual assaults. So the most important thing to unlearn, I tied my own sentence in a knot. The most important thing for me to learn is body autonomy.
Yes.
And to unlearn that you're good if you accept touch that your body doesn't want. This is such a destructive act to women and to people.
Yes.
That to undo the evil of that is a paramount, critical, important baseline. Get your head out from underneath the drowning waters in the middle of the ocean kind of desperate need. So start there. Is how to say. Oh,
we got a frozen for a sec.
Okay, am I back?
Oh, there you are. She's back.
Yes.
I think learning that I'm allowed to have body autonomy.
Yes.
Practicing saying no. Growing the thick skin to understand I'm in a culture that's not going to smile upon me when I set boundaries. Just day-to-day stuff. Like at a coffee shop, when I was really learning that I'm allowed to have body autonomy, a man put his hand on my leg who I didn't know well, who I'd seen maybe, who was like, wait, don't we know each other? And I'm like, I'm noticing your hands on my knee. And I'm not comfortable with that. Oh, well, nobody's ever, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, it's infuriating.
Right.
And because he didn't handle it well. Fuck you.
Yeah.
If you can see, like, I'm allowing myself my appropriate rage.
Yeah.
Took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
But that's just one tiny little boundary I set in a coffee shop. So what really is the world I'm living in?
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking hostile.
Mm.
So we here in this space are talking about things that are revolutionary, that are so boring to us, almost like we're always talking about consent and boundary. But it's revolutionary if we take one step outside of our safe bubble
Yeah.
to actually live those lessons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that could be a whole lifetime. It's just, oh, I have body autonomy in this space. I'm allowed to say no to touch I do not want.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're asking, what about the yeses? What do I actually crave?
Yeah.
Such a sacred question that for many of us who've had trauma, it's like, do we even dare?
Yeah.
Do we even know anymore?
Are you allowed to want something for yourself?
There's so much grief. There's so much grief. So just this morning, like last night and this morning, I was hanging out with COVID safe friends where we can be in space without masks. And it's the three of us. And one of them has a manicure where she has, I think, augmented nails. And whenever I see anybody with nails, like beautiful nails like that, I just I'm like, if I could, I would have you caressing my skin with your nails. And I wouldn't have to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I would just be quietly enjoying it like a cat gets to enjoy the pleasure of touch.
Yeah.
And I would be able to have that. So I'm sort of describing my desire that I could have that for as long as I want, which might be all day. So being able to be in touch with that desire, and I had the desire last night, but I didn't say anything. But this morning, because it was a sleepover, it was like a slumber party, I asked. And I had a few minutes of complete and utter bliss of having those nails. And then I got to sort of like a bear, sort of move around the way I wanted it on my back, and awesome. Move my arm around, how I wanted it, and I say like a bear because it's like if the tree were here, then I was sort of moving myself,
right.
Scratching the tree
along it. So I consider that really advanced, and yet I didn't ask for it last night. I was too sheepish.
Yeah.
Ask for what I want. Do I dare?
But you did this morning and it worked out really well.
And there were also tears. As I was talking about, as part of the conversation over the course of this time with these friends, I realized that I have blocked myself from certain pleasures, thinking that the world doesn't want me to have them as an older woman. So the safe space of knowing what I want and being able to ask for it needs to be so safe that I can also cry.
Yes.
And that isn't like, maybe down the line in our collective future, it won't always be that way. Maybe for our kids or grandkids or great grandkids, but for today, there's so much grief, so much loss.
Yeah.
So to speak about this stuff without talking about grief and loss is to miss a really important element.
Yeah, I agree. And Grace, that's your sweet spot, isn't it?
It is. I love using touch to heal, to help people heal their grief. It's not, I haven't specifically used, I haven't yet had, how do I want to say this? The clients that I work with are typically more often people who are dealing with loss of like to me losses, someone died or a breakup or a loss of job, things that happened to me. But I feel like that's a step deeper into the pool that I would love to continue to work, helping people to grieve their loss of autonomy, their loss of body sovereignty, if you will.
We can't get there until we start to have glimmers of it.
Yeah. Yes.
Like sometimes you can't grieve the thing until you're safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, it's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, to even recognize that was missing, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about how early that starts. Be a good girl, go hug Auntie Grace. You know, like, no, I just met this kid. They don't have to hug me. It's okay.
Yeah.
If you want to, I'll be more than happy to hug you. But if you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
How lucky anybody would be to have Auntie Grace at their gathering where there are children to teach these lessons.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of touched on this a little, Jean, but how do you define or think about vulnerability? I mean, a lot of people in our culture would say being vulnerable or letting other people know what our emotions are, how we really feel, is a weakness. What would you say to that?
Just say poor men. That is just that is the lesson of men and boys.
Yeah.
First and foremost. And it is so sad. Such a damage to them.
Yeah.
Little boys cry because things are ouchy.
Yeah.
Things continue to be ouchy throughout the human life. But they can't express it anymore.
Yeah.
That's a fucking trap.
Yeah.
So there's a gender divide in the lessons, and it has particularly cruel for men. So I feel like it's important because that message, like when those of us who cuddle, when we are holding somebody who identifies as male and their sadness comes up, the first thing, or even just in life, when you are a safe port for a man, and their sadness begins to emerge, the very first thing they say as the tears begin to go right up the throat is, I'm sorry. Because they're so fucking embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated that the blocked sadness is finally coming out. They have to apologize to have something needed to emerge out of them. Ugh.
And it's heartbreaking to me that anyone needs to apologize for feelings, for emotions, for allowing their emotions to evolve or to emerge. It's heartbreaking to me that anybody has to apologize for that.
And then in our strange culture where people are coupling up, and sometimes maybe the only person that man can be heart opened with is their partner, that's a trap in itself. We need community for healing. We need many people in which that we can be our authentic selves. So it's just it puts too much pressure on one-on-one relationships, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm sorry that you feel that this has hurt you all this time, that you feel like you can't have emotional release, and yeah, especially being in like a cuddle experience where you have that framework of safety. I feel like that is part of what it's for, of like, that is the safe space where you can do this here. That's what.
And it's why many people who identify as male will go to a sex worker. Step one is, well, they've been given permission to want sex. Okay, then they can do that at least, you know. And then they cry in the arms of their sex worker, or cuddle them, or share their real feelings or their thoughts about their life. And it's their only person. in which that they can truly share. And that's as old as time as well. So God bless all of those one-on-one beautiful, tender moments between sex workers and their clients. And we're trying to tease out these services, but think about what that means for people who go after those services. It's just easier to just call yourself a sex, it's easier to go to a sex worker and get those needs met on the, on the down low than to say, what I really want is a good cuddle. You know what I mean? So we're asking people to come out by using our services in ways that is an obstacle in itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think of another question for you, Jean, in your experience. Well, from my experience, what I've found is that a lot of people like in sex positive communities that feel like they're really like sexually evolved, they're like terrified of cuddling because it's so intimate. Do you find that too?
I've heard that. And I find that really fun.
Yeah, it's kind of entertaining to me.
It is, because some people have learned how to navigate sexual spaces and have satisfying experiences that are very genital focused without following the bonding that can happen, or possibly some people are just not pretending they're not bonded, and some people just aren't bonding with their sex partners in some cases, and so they're like, look how cool I am. But when you say, and I'm going to hold you for a period of time, it's like, oh no, I might cry. So that's just really fun. Is like it's like the people that we might look up to is like, ooh, you're doing advanced work because you're moving into sexuality. It's like, oh yeah, if you slow down a minute, you're doing advanced work too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about how early those expectations start, or the expectation of not having physical autonomy, physical sovereignty. So, and what it kind of brought to my mind, how it might help to heal our inner child. So my question for you, Jean, is, do you feel more childlike or connected to your inner child when you are cuddling?
I feel like that's a softball, because, and I'm giggling about that because I feel like, I think we've probably been in spaces together where you might have heard the child voice that comes out of me. Have you ever heard me like go into oxytocin bliss where I start, oh, this is what we're doing. Obviously, like looking at your face, that wasn't top of mind, because I'm like, oh, it's been a minute since we've been in cuddle space together because of the pandemic. But that is what happens, is that often I get blissed out on oxytocin, and then this little girl voice comes out of me, and it's pure joy. It's like dolphin energy. Squee! Squee! Safety allows for creativity, allows for parts of my personality to come out. And one of them, some of them are very young, and I'm so happy to be able to have access to that at times.
Yeah. Lovely.
In fact, there's a video that I got to be in a video where I was cuddling with somebody, and it's on video, and all of a sudden I went, yeah. Like, there's a few of them where I'm like, uh-oh, it's been captured. I can think of two awesome. Where I'm like, let's do this new position. Okay. And it's like, uh-oh. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
It's you without filters. That's the whole point, right?
Yes. And I think that's wonderful. There's when I'm leading a group, or when I'm the professional as opposed to being the client, it's like I don't necessarily always allow myself to get there, because I'm working, holding the space.
Vigilance.
Yeah,
it's a different part of the mind.
Yeah.
For sure. And part of the training of event leaders includes the question, when we're in the free form, the laboratory, which we sometimes joke is like free range cuddling, when all of the facilitation is over and all the guidelines have been set, and there's maybe 45 minutes or a period of time where everyone's just chilling.
Yeah.
How deep can we go into the cuddle pile?
Yeah.
And the answer is somebody's got to be holding the space, being aware of what's happening, staying conscious to the energy in the room, noticing if there's something amiss. That feels important to me, that somebody is. Even if I go to the bathroom, I will say to a professional cuddler in the space, can you please hold space while I step away? They're in charge. It's almost like kids, like, that's mommy's going to the store. This is who's in charge.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to infantilize anybody, but I do feel like it's important that the space be held.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of creating safety, right? To have somebody holding space. What is holding space?
Well, oh, that's such like, what is a container? Esoteric, right?
Yeah.
I would say that my job when working one-on-one or in groups is to create an environment where somebody else can surrender safely, or according to their level of that they feel confident surrendering or ability to surrender. How do I do that? Well,
how do you do
that? The door is locked, then nobody's going to all of a sudden come into the cuddle space. I make sure that if somebody enters the space and they begin hugging and touching and they don't know the guidelines, or they know them and they're violating them, that I interrupt that, that I handle that, because it's my responsibility. So that those are the protective aspects of holding space. It's my job to be really clear on what the guidelines are.
So you set up the guidelines in the beginning, right? Even before you start cuddling.
Yeah, I think it's important that people get a multimedia exposure to how to be in a space with a cuddler or in a cuddle event. And so reading about it, listening to videos about it, then you go to this space and they tell you about it. Then you might see a post on the wall about it. So that and also you're watching people and observing and seeing how others do it. So there's many ways to learn, as there are learners.
Yeah.
That's part of it, of holding space, is being responsible that everyone gets it. Which means one time when somebody did not have a strong handle of English, it wasn't English as a second or third language, is no handle on the language. Can that person be in the cuddle space? And it depends. Maybe they've learned elsewhere how to do it, but I have to keep my eye on that person because I'm responsible. That they understand it, and that's how some ways in which that I consider it a very protective mindset to be in. Wolf mother.
Yeah.
I like that. That's awesome.
So what other modalities do you use? I'm hearing that you use ASMR. Are there, would you like to talk about that or any other modalities?
You know, because of COVID, the idea of virtual cuddling or Zoom offering sessions or experiences via Zoom never would have come to my mind. Just was the whole point of this work is to get contact human to human. However, COVID invited me to get creative. How can I create value if somebody wants a virtual session? And it expanded my repertoire. I began to study ASMR as simply a recipient of it on YouTube. There's so many amazing videos out there. And I'm like, you know, if somebody likes this, I don't know if you can hear this tapping.
No, I can.
Yeah, if somebody likes that, if that helps them feel comfortable, then maybe adding some sound to my virtual sessions might be useful to them. I have not had clients take me up on it, but certainly I have the patience, and I could certainly get a really expensive microphone. Am I willing to whisper? You know what I mean? So I have not expanded my repertoire and have a strong ASM artist practice, but I'm a fan of expanding skill sets. Sure. I think one of the most important skill sets to have would be the authentic relating palette of skills, learning how to be a great listener, learning how to ask great questions, being less interested in the data that we exchange. How tall are you? What color are you wearing? what is your favorite movie? And possibly getting into the presence with a human being is a wonderful skill to have.
Yeah. So, how has working in the field of consent made your personal intimate connections more enjoyable or more safe or more rich?
I think I needed to notice where I was overtaking, I'm trying to think of the right word, where I was ignoring my own yeses and nos in my personal relationships or my intimate relationships.
Yeah.
There's a whole school of thought around navigating love that also is a clusterfuck. So I've had to slow my roll a lot. As somebody who was really proud of the strides that I took in sexuality and like, ooh, I'm learning things I like and things like that. I had to back up and slow down and be exquisitely and excruciatingly honest. It's a little bit vague. I'm trying to think of, where my entry point might be for an example. I was finding myself pushing sexuality, initiating sexuality that I wasn't even wanting myself because I was trying to be an achiever.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was trying to be successful at relationships. I was trying to have the hot, sizzling relationship that I might see in a movie. What's really paradoxical is that somehow, somewhere around the pandemic, like that slowed things down considerably. Because I wasn't like seeking out multiple partners. It was just like, let's just keep things simple, right? So that sort of simplified things. But also entering into, I'm 51 now, but entering into hormonal changes that happen as I enter into perimenopause or whatever it wants to be called, my sex drive diminished to almost nothing for a period of time. And that was really confusing. But where that enters into consent is like, but my identity is based on being a certain kind of person in relationship. And then I would push a sexual experience, for example, with my partner, and we would have bad experiences. Or my partner has their own history of partners saying yes to being sexual when sexuality isn't wanting to happen in the moment. So now nobody's having fun, but we're all like doing the behaviors that seem like they're fun, but everybody's sad. To unpack that.
Yeah.
And frankly, to be loved, even though I had no taste for sexuality or sex for a long time, was excruciating to not be able to offer that in a relationship, but to continue to receive love anyway. I wouldn't have gotten that lesson if I didn't have a hormonal dip. And now I understand love differently than I ever have. That many other people have gotten, and maybe I've seen it over there or yonder, but now I've felt it, what that is. And I'm changed.
Yeah.
And do you feel like these tools that you've learned on this on your sexual journey and your cuddle journey have helped you with those kind of lessons?
I think that I have more to say about what I feel like was like the seminal of this interview. It seems to be a seminal question of the interview is, how does this cross over? How is it useful? How does it fit into a bigger fabric of life? And this is a great example of where the work informed my life and where the lessons, healer, heal thyself, where the lessons had to be learned from within me. Me being humble with like, wow, there's a lot I still don't know and that other people have a really good handle on lessons I've never gotten. Leading me to believe that everybody who's amazing and really skilled and advanced in some areas of their life is a child in other areas of their life. I have a feeling that everybody fits into that category.
Oh yeah, I agree.
That's really humbling because the places in which that I'm really young are places that most people have like buttoned up. So I feel really sheepish.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say most.
Mm.
I wouldn't say most.
But you don't know my secrets.
You're right, I don't. Want to share?
Yeah. One of them, Mary, before we started, you were eating a delicious soup. Yeah, I have a feeling you made it.
I did make it.
It had turkey in it. It had bell pepper. It had a tomato base.
Very good.
Like the act of planning for, shopping for, making food to nourish myself on a day-to-day has been an absolute challenge for me for years.
Me too, actually. Yeah.
And that there are other people who might struggle with consent who are like, you just whip it up in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Whip it up.
Because those are lessons that they got and they understand now self-nurturing in those ways.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's all, you plan for it, you learn, you build on that, you learn the next thing. Yeah.
I'm getting better and better.
That's awesome.
Lovely.
Well, we're getting toward the end of our time, but I would like to hear, let's talk about nerdy stuff. What do you like that you would consider nerdy, or do you not like to use the word nerd? Or
I'm happy to use the word nerd. One area that I'm diving deep is in the area of the subconscious mind or the unconscious. I'm amazed how rich a place that it is. It's really rich. And the obstacle to give myself the gift of that is that it could be, one could judge oneself as doing a lot of navel gazing. And yet somehow we humans, I'll speak for myself, but given that there are books on it and entire modes of therapy based on it, we humans have been gifted with really rich behind the scenes lives, as evidenced by dreams and by certain like talents and abilities that just like things that sort of come through people, like through art, that it just, they're like, I don't know, I'm just taking notes on something coming through. And it's like, you're a genius. Am I? I'm just listening and taking notes on something I'm hearing, whatever that is. I'm into it lately. I started a pandemic journal of dreams in the beginning of the pandemic because my dreams were coming so richly. I'm like, there's something here. And in October, I was re-looking at some writings and I'm like, what? A month and a half ago or whatever, one morning I woke up and had 6 distinct dreams.
Wow.
6 paragraphs of 6 very distinct places in which I visited. And I, at a time was seeing a Jungian analyst where dream work was like part of the meat and potatoes of our work together. And she taught me that it wasn't just like when I would have a grouping of dreams, to not think of them as unique, separate jewels, but instead there might be a message, there might be a through line or a theme that they're all speaking to. And I'm like, what kind of fucking genius in my, whatever you call it, that just comes up with 6 things like that in the middle of the night while I'm resting. That's valuable in my decision making in the world, or that is warning me of danger in certain cases, like psychic danger.
Very interesting.
That's rich. That's rich and interesting.
Yeah. No, our unconscious mind, I could totally nerd out with you about unconscious mind and how it works. And wait, you, if I plant this seed before I go to sleep, then it's working on it. And then what? Yeah.
What a gift.
Fascinating.
Right?
Yeah.
What a gift. My, that Jungian therapist shared with me, like when I'm ever dreaming about animals, to think about the idea that it's probably related to instinct.
Yeah.
I'm like, interesting. When I'm, when I'm drowning in water or in the middle of a water or journey, I mean, it's just like, it's interesting. I don't mean to like be so black and white, like this means such and such, but I had one of the dreams I had, I think that was in that 6 was I was a really, really rich man that was being chased by other really rich, privileged, resourced men who needed to take a spacecraft off of Earth to be safe away from the people who were pursuing him. But he had a certain level of confidence in riding this, driving this spacecraft, but like it was sketchy, but he felt like I could take that risk. We could talk for ages about that one.
Yeah.
Dream studying. Yeah. Very interesting. Are there any games that you like? Are you a gamer, or do you like board games, or?
I like Cranium.
Oh,
so I like games where you get to like make stuff, last night we played a couple games and they were both fun. One of them was you put on a little crown and then you put a card on your head that you can see and nobody else, you cannot see. And then you ask everyone questions. Am I a this? Am I a that? Am I a this? Am I a that? Just try to figure out who you are. I was a whale. But anyway, it's just silly. And then another game, which was a kinesthetic game where we were building stuff with colored blocks and and we cooperated to try to, build the tallest thing. And so I like games but mostly I do like games like where you perform something, because that's like my base level silliness. So not Pictionary, but like charade type games, which Cranium has it.
Connection performing type games.
Yeah, I like the silliness of that.
Have you done Celebrity?
I love that one. There's one called, I think, Dead Celebrity. And what I like about it is this is when it's done in 3 rounds.
Yes.
So the first one, you can be like, he talks like this and has a friend named Pluto. And then maybe somebody will be like Mickey Mouse, right? But the second round, you can only use 2 words.
Yeah.
Like Pluto, Mickey Mouse, you know what I mean? So after you do a couple rounds, you begin to learn it. And the silliness comes not in the discussing it, but doing it.
Yes.
And I love it.
How fun.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, Jean, because we are getting close to our time. What, if you had to leave us with one nugget today, what would be your nugget?
Don't underestimate the power of a hug to lift you out of sadness.
Yeah.
And I only say that because of the power of touch. To just, yesterday I was feeling so heavy. And I asked my friend for a shoulder rub, and I can tell you 50% of my sadness just went lifted off of me. 50% of my sadness just through the touch.
Yeah.
I didn't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
The touch did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then add a cry because I felt safe and I was able to share something. Okay.
Mhm.
Whoop.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate what it can do to lift sadness.
I have
Love that.
a similar experience that I was at the dentist and feeling a sudden surge of anxiety. And I put up my hand. I said, somebody has to stop. You have to stop and somebody has to touch me.
Wow.
And so
brave.
The dentist put his hand on my shoulder. The assistant held my hand.
Oh my God.
And I breathed for like a moment. And, you know, the dentist actually said some soothing words.
Oh my gosh.
And I was able to calm so that he could finish his work.
Oh my gosh.
It was, I mean, just a hand on the shoulder, a hand in my hand. Okay. Oh, Jean, we lost you for a second.
You're back.
Am I back? I said, to me, Grace, that's mastery. What do I mean by that? I mean, when I was with my two safe friends, they're cuddle friendly friends, and I know they are.
Yeah.
You were in the default world.
Yeah.
When at Burning Man, they call the default world, which is like our culture. And you brought the safety in, or you said, I have a need.
Yeah.
Right. Do you know how often I feel so sad? And I could have at the bank said, somebody, please hold my hand. Right. But I just stay locked very often in the bubble of sad and just walk around as a sad unit in the world. But to penetrate your need, but you know, that's mastery. And I have great respect.
Thank you. I think I sometimes I feel like that's my job because I still have that corporate job. And the more I learn about myself and this world of community and to consent and touch, I feel like that's part of my job to bring it into the corporate setting, like to make it okay to say, hey, I need a hug.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of a taxi driver who used to come to Cuddle Sanctuary and said to me one day, guess what I did today? Somebody was sad in the car or grieving in the back of the taxi. And I said, do you need a hug? And then they gave that person a hug. I'm like, my work here is done. Feeling like, you know what? If I was like plucked from the earth, I'm like, well, that's good enough.
You've got a legacy in that taxi driver.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, such pride.
Oh, Jean, it has been so wonderful talking to you today. I've really enjoyed having you with us. Thank you for coming.
I really appreciate the care in which that you've come together with such great, thoughtful questions. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anything else you feel like you need to say? Yeah,
if somebody is listening to us and longing to be able to provide cuddling services, I wholeheartedly invite you to come to a free webinar on being a professional cuddler, or a free webinar on leading events. Because guess what? One day this pandemic will be something else. We'll be able to come together more safely eventually. And if that's something you're craving for, just go to cuddlesanctuary.com and click on training.
Yeah, that was the next question. How do people find you? So cuddlesanctuary.com and
Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Cuddle Sanctuary, cuddlesanctuary.com. I'm really proud of lots of blogs there. And but the website is where all the juicy, there's a store and there's all the classes are there. So that's kind of the hub of my presence on the internet, is that website.
Oh, that's so fabulous. How do you feel after doing this interview with us?
Grounded, respected, connected, and some word that means in community. In the way that I can. I have my own things and ways that separate, right? But in this way, I can come together so wholeheartedly, and I'm grateful for that. Thanks for asking me and inviting me.
Wonderful. Well, I feel the same, and I feel very flattered that you would choose those words to be with us. Thank you.
Yeah.
So should I like leave the call? Is that my job now?
No, you can stay on. We're going to chat a little bit more, and we're going to talk about our favorite cuddle pose, and then we're going to tell people how to find us. So you can stay as long as you want.
I will. Okay, thank you.
Please do stay. Okay,
So Mary,
Grace, what's next?
We had talked about selecting the pose of the week,
Mm-hmm.
and you suggested hand dancing. And
yeah,
I love that name for it. And so it's something that we can do with others, and it's something that we can do with ourselves. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I love it. And if you guys have the video, Jean's doing it right now. So yeah, I feel like we get too far down the road of like, oh my gosh, I have to do cuddling. I have to go right into like, let's spoon, or, you know, what are all these full body poses? No, what if you just asked somebody, can I touch your hands? And if you just kind of, like, I know a lot of people who love having their palm tickled, you know, and I'll just sit there, and while we're talking, maybe I'll tickle their palm, and it's so relaxing. Or if you kind of just go up your fingers and maybe up down up the other side, and yeah, you can do it with yourself, Grace. I love that too. So and this is a technique I've used in virtual sessions where when I can't be with somebody, like maybe I would just describe what I'm doing and say, you can feel my hand, you can feel my fingers going up the back of your hand and going up your fingers. You can close your eyes and feel my fingers now coming from the tips of your fingers down to your palm. And you know, our hands just have so much sensory input available to them, and just all the different ways you can interact with just your hands alone, with yourself and with your partners, is, I think it's underrated. People just dismiss it too easily. There's so much you can do with your hands. So yeah, that's my suggestion for cuddle pose of the week position.
And I have to admit that I find it so valuable. I use this kind of work in my virtual groups, and I forget how calming this can be. And so I have a Post-it on my desk at work that just says hands. And so if I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling like, you know, stressed or whatever, just taking a moment to do that can mean so, it just, it down regulates me, and it feels so good.
Yeah, and I love it. And Jean's even expanding. Do you want to tell us what you're doing, Jean?
Well, what did I do?
You were playing with, you were touching your face.
Oh, I was experimenting.
Yeah.
Like as Grace was talking, I'm like, do I like that? Nope, not as much as this.
Not as much. Yeah.
But the experiment is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Certainly. Jean, do you have a favorite cuddle position?
Right now, what's like touched my heart is that I was sitting on the couch yesterday, and my friend, who I have great amount of comfort with, chose to put his back against mine. And he was looking at the fish tank, and I was reading a book. And I'm like, I'm in a state of bliss right now. If we could just, if he would just not move. Like every second was nourishing me. I'm like, every second, I'm like, it was like filling me up, like filling me up. I'm like, just more, please, just don't move, just don't move. And then I put my book down and went to sleep.
Oh, lovely.
So back to back.
I love back to back. And that's another one people don't think of, because it's things like, it's like, oh, well, we're back to back, we're not looking at each other, but it really is connecting. And I've especially seen like men at my cuddle events do that with each other and really connect in that position, because they're not looking at each other, so it feels more safe, I think. But you have that solid foundation of somebody supporting you at the back. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think we're gonna give our promos, and we're almost to the end. So you can so our website is nurturednerds.com, and we're working on it right now. It's not up at the moment, but it will be very soon. So please check back there for nurturednerds.com. And we're at facebook.com Nurtured Nerds, and we're still helping promote Cassandra Brown's program, Jerk Proof Your Relationships, which is awesome. So please go check her out, cassandrabrown.org, Cassandra with a K. And then we've got a meetup now where we're posting the nerd breaks. So it's meetup.com/nurtured-nerds. So go find us at the meetup and see what our online events are. And yeah, we're also working on a raffle for any members who sign up with us. And if you want to know what that is, you can find all the details on the Facebook and then the website, because there's a lot of cool stuff we're giving away for new members in this raffle.
Awesome.
All right, so let's are we feeling nurtured, you guys?
Oh,
Yes.
I am.
Yes, me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So as is our tradition that we learned from Grace, I would invite you to put your arms right out and then bring them in and give yourself a hug if you want. And as Grace says, since she's here with us, maybe you'll tell us, Grace,
What's
about
that?
hugging yourself when you
Well, when we hug other people, we're
Mhm.
often thinking good thoughts about them.
Mhm.
So I like to encourage us when we're hugging ourselves, think good thoughts about that person that you're hugging.
Mhm.
Hold that person in deep care and love.
Mhm. Mm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.